welcome to Get Even, the podcast where Even co-founders myself, Ellen Sullivan, and Dr. Nora Kozlowski sit down with extraordinary women who've been there and done that in the world of business. Get Even is your backstage pass to their lived experiences, raw insights, personal stories, and the realities of their success. So whether you're looking for inspiration, practical advice and skills, or a peek behind the curtain of what it really takes to thrive, this is the podcast for women who are ready to go further. It's time to get even. Today we're joined by Shilpa Jhunjhunwala, who is a powerhouse in tech, media, finance, and she's really known for driving strategic growth and fostering innovation in the businesses she works with. She's got a remarkable track record of building over 35 strategic partnerships for these organizations. And this is right through from early stage investments all the way to launching cutting edge products that are all about digital transformation. At Google, Shilpa made a significant impact as the interim head of India and leader of the news partnerships and APAC news products go-to-market. She's led teams across 4 countries, driving new products to new heights. And some of her achievements include representing Google in pivotal debates about big tech's role in the news ecosystem and leading a pioneering digital news academy for journalists. It's time to get even. Let's meet Shilpa.
Thank you, Ellen, and thanks for the generous introduction.
So I'd like to get straight into it with our first question for you, Shilpa. So you have a global career and you've adapted in very different cultural contexts, so the US, India, Singapore, Australia. Can you share your view on the value of global roles and assignments for career trajectory?
Yes, Ellen, I'm a huge fan of international, not just career, but life experiences, and I am a massive advocate for it. Let me share why, but first, a little bit of context. I grew up in a small town in India, and then at the age of 16, I was selected to attend a prestigious international school in Singapore as a scholar. And being at that age and being surrounded by people from all different cultures and contexts, it singularly transformed my life and it set me on the trajectory on which I am today. Before we delve into potential career benefits that I see, I feel like at a very, very human level, working with and connecting with people from many different cultures will make you realize that people are more similar than different. And that has been massive in the way I interact with people, and where those differences exist in customs and traditions, they are to be celebrated and honored rather than to be afraid of. It has helped me expand my identity. It has helped me open up to ideas and ways of living that are different to my own. And I think, if it was important 20 years ago when I started my career, it's even more important today when we live in a world that's increasingly polarized. In terms of career, I would say there's tons of benefits, but I want to talk about 3. First is, in the globalized world that we live in today, there is a high chance that you will have international stakeholders. They could be colleagues, customers, bosses, or your direct reports. And there is no better way to empathize and understand those cultural nuances than having immersed yourself in a different country. Second, I would say that it is coveted by many employers that you have an international outlook and mindset. For example, I had an ex-manager at Google who, when he recruited for global partnership roles, almost mandated, it wasn't official, but he mandated that people had either grown up in a country outside of their country of birth or had some sort of experience globally, even if it was for a short assignment, and or that they even spoke a language that was different from their own. So if you are able to really get that experience, I think that could be a unique point of differentiation for you. And the third thing I would say, which is actually really important, is that when you live in a country that's different from your own or interact with people with different cultures, you're kind of aware of your own biases, because we all grow up and we have some conditioning. And the more aware you are of your biases and stereotypes, the more effective you can be. I think, I won't trivialize it. Moving countries is hard, but Now there's so many systems and apps and services that exist to make it easy for you, that if you do have the privilege and the chance, I would absolutely say you should not only just, embrace it, but also seek it actively.
Wow. Wow. I'm glad we started with that question. There's so much to learn
I'm so passionate about it, as you
yeah,
can
it's
tell.
amazing. It's great. You've studied at the best institutions for business in the world. So this is Wharton and Harvard Business School. What did you learn at these institutions that you'd like to share with others?
Yes, Ellen, I've been very privileged. It's been an absolute privilege having the opportunity to study in these two institutions. I would say that both because of the time in my life when I did my degrees at these institutions, and also in their way of teaching, I had two very different experiences. And that was sort of the intent. So at Wharton, when I first arrived there, I was 18. I was there from 18 to 22 years of age. And it was academically very rigorous. So it set very strong technical and academic foundations for me. And even though my degree was in business and economics, I had to do and I enjoyed doing the basics of many different disciplines. So science, statistics, calculus, political science, and I also studied Spanish all through university, which was great. And it's a skill I still use today. It also included a semester in Madrid where I lived with a host family in a totally different environment before the age of 21. And that was fantastic. From a life perspective at Wharton, even though I don't think that's the intent of the institution, I did move from one of the safest countries in the world, which is Singapore, to one of the most dangerous countries in the world where Wharton is, Philadelphia. And so I learned at a young age how to keep myself safe. I highlight that because that was equally as important as my academic education. In contrast, when I arrived at Harvard for my MBA, I was 27 years old. I had also already been working, and also a lot of my peers in my class had a few years of work experience under their belt. So I would say that I already had the foundational skills in business, but what Harvard really teaches you is not so much how to build a balance sheet or the technical skills. It teaches you more how to look at things from a leadership and general management perspective. So rather than build a balance sheet, how do you spot accounting fraud? How do you deal with complex challenges as a business leader where there is no clear right or wrong answer? How do you formulate your own code of ethics? So these are more the skills that I learned. The way Harvard teaches you at Harvard Business School is it's 100% case study method. So you don't have a professor lecturing you. The professors act more as a moderator, where they'll give you a certain situation or a case, and then you have to critically think through it. You have to find peers that have expertise in that area and learn how to collaborate with them. And the other big thing is it's all class participation based. So you have to get comfortable not only forming a point of view, but articulating it in a room full of very opinionated and smart people, having the courage to defend your point of view and respectfully disagree if that's what is called for. I would say, though, that even though I've had the education in these institutions, I've also learned a lot on the job. And no institution will teach you everything. For instance, AI was not a thing 15 years ago when I graduated from Harvard. So the other skill that I feel like I've learned is just becoming really good at learning, independent research, figuring out what information I need to know and what I can filter out. And then from a life standpoint, figuring out what success means to me and how I should stack myself against my classmates. And that's not always who's the highest achiever, but what are the stories that I find inspiring and what I want for my own life. So it's just been a fantastic experience, both academically and in life.
We do ask a lot of our experts, which would be, what does success mean to you? What does it mean to you personally and professionally?
Yes, Elena, and I've put in a lot of thought into it, and I also coach people to do the same. So my definition of success is balance. It's not super sexy, it's not like I want to be a CEO or anything like that. I know that I feel the most successful and content when I have balance in my life. There's four pillars that I kind of see in my life. One is health, mental and physical. One is work, one is fun, and the most important for me is family and friends or relationship. And I find that when I have harmony in these four pillars is when I feel most successful. That doesn't mean that I don't over index on one versus the other sometimes. Sometimes health takes priority, sometimes work does. But by and large, I will not sacrifice any of these areas in my life for another. And so that really helps me because I'll see classmates that are running multi-billion-dollar businesses or are in Forbes 40 under 40, but I also see the sacrifices it took for them to get there. And that's not what I want to do with my life. So helping define, success for yourself will just naturally help you make the right trade-offs in life, I think.
I love that. I love that you've created your own personal model of success there, and you've got those four pillars, and you're so clear, and it just allows you to make
Thank
decisions
you.
really, really fast, I would imagine, because you know what's important to you. So, Shilpa, you're an ethically principled leader working in competitive and revenue driven environments. What are your operating principles to achieve this? So, like, do you have specific practices that you've found that are most effective to remain ethically principled? And how do you encourage your teams to do that as well?
Thanks, Ellen. I really like this question. It really forced me to reflect. I'll start off by a quote that I love that kind of frames my approach. And it's by one of my favorite professors at HBS, Harvard, Professor Clay Christensen. And he said, it's easier to hold your principles 100% of the time than it is to hold them 98% of the time. And I've always been clear on my principles, but to be honest, when I started my career, I had like 15 and I was very idealistic. And I think the corporate world has challenged them, it has thrown curveballs. It has really forced me to rethink. What it has done for me is it has helped me narrow it down. This is my opinion. Maybe you can have 15 principles that you stick to 100% of the time. But what I have found useful for me is that over time, I've narrowed them down to identify what are the 4 or 5 things that are so valuable to me that I'm going to stick to them 100% of the time, no matter what. And that has served me and also proved an example for my team, right? So I'd rather have 5 principles that I stick to 100% of the time than 10 that I stick to 70% of the time. So let me give you an example of a principle that I've let go of, as well as a couple that I feel like I won't compromise on no matter what. So the first example of something I've had to let go of, and this is me being very honest here, is meritocracy. Meritocracy was something that was super important to me, and it still is. And to the extent that it's in my power, I will do what I can. But I have realized that corporates don't always work based on meritocracy. Sometimes it is people that just know how to play the game better, have better political connections. So it is not something I'm going to die on a hill for. But a couple of principles that I will never, ever compromise on. So, first, I never lie. I never, ever lie. No matter even if it's slight bending of the truth, the moment it feels uncomfortable for me, I will leave the room, take myself off of negotiations, choose not to attend a meeting, but I never ever lie. And the second principle, where I've really had to put my money where my mouth is I will not stand for any unacceptable behavior for myself or my team. And to give you an example, we had a partner that we worked with in India where I found out that the founder of that company had verbally abused one of my direct reports twice. And as soon as I found out about it, I took her off the account and sent a letter of termination. I was very relieved that my management supported me on it, but there is no revenue or partnership that's important enough to tolerate disrespect. So I think, in summary, being very clear on which principles you're going to hold 100% of the time has been a really important example for my team as well. The thing is, you have to let each person come up with their own non-negotiables. You can't do it for them, but then showing that this is the way that you stick to your non-negotiables, it's just leading by example.
Yeah, I can imagine that by having a leader who is so clear
on their principles and what they won't change, it allows everyone else to work out, well, what do I stand for? And it has this quite large ripple effect, but that is quite unique. So thank you for sharing that and helping us understand how to do that as well. What strategies do you use to navigate those high stake discussions that you were chatting about? As an example, at Google, you represented a company in critical debates about big tech's role in the news ecosystem. So, how do you hold your nerve and your ground when you're in these high stakes situations and usually managing them as well?
Yeah, I came up with 5 strategies, I would say, and none of it is rocket science, but I'm very, very intentional about all of these 5. So first, I would say is prepare, 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 over prepare, prepare as much as you can. There are instances, very rare instances, where I've been thrown into something high stakes with no warning. But I would say 99% of the time, whether it's when I've had to represent my company to the press or to the ACCC, the Competition Commission, in big, government hearings and things like that, I've had time to prepare. There is a village out there, even if you're not working for a Google that has a ton of resources, there's courses you can do, such as media training. Use your network. I had an ex-journalist friend do a mock kind of interview with me till I almost cried. And then nothing I faced after that was as tough as that kind of drill with my friend. So in a safe environment, practice as much as you can. I read everything that was given to me, even if the briefing docs were like 50 pages long. So just, yeah, I can't stress the importance of preparation enough. The second thing is people. My second strategy is people. Really knowing who will be in the room or who you're speaking with, even if they're not the people leading the discussion, just who the audience is, who your fellow peers are, what makes them tick, what they care about, what are their hot buttons. And then once you're in the room with them or even online, just really finding ways to connect with them outside of their titles and also portraying yourself as a human being, right? Because we are all like people actually behind the titles we hold. The third thing I would say is finding a mindfulness practice that works for you. For me, meditation has been a regular practice in my life for the past 15 years. And there are meditation techniques I use before entering into high stakes discussions, but actually the daily practice, the daily 10, 15, 20 minutes is what helps you build that resilience. And I feel like I can very objectively disassociate myself from the nervousness that I'm feeling. And that has been huge. The fourth strategy I would say is high stakes communication is as much about listening and observing as it is about speaking. So I don't speak much. I speak very selectively and I spend a lot of time just observing the dynamics in the room. And last, I would say the fifth strategy is after every such engagement, gathering feedback, speaking to people in the room or your colleagues if they happen to be there, and then doing some reflection. What did I do well? What could I have done differently? And what are the things I need to work for the next time around?
And have you found that the approach is different as a woman?
I at Google, which has been I have done some high stakes communications before, but I would say Google took it to another level. Um, I was fortunate enough to have a leadership team that was mostly women. So I think that gave me a lot of comfort. However, I would say that I was oftentimes the only woman of color in the room, and that was a little bit unnerving at times. But I think the biggest thing is you use your strengths. I used my international experience. I spoke about the knowledge I had gained working outside of Australia, and doubling down on those strengths gave me a lot of credibility. Oftentimes, people say that women need to prepare more, and I don't agree with that. I think women generally prepare a lot more. So it's not so much about preparation. I think maybe as a woman, I feel like I've had to work a little bit harder to be seen and heard. And the things that you can do for that is very deliberate. It's uncomfortable, but I would sit in the front in the most uncomfortable seat. I would jump in early because the longer you wait, the harder it is. There are cultures I've worked in where it's common to interrupt women or talk over them. And so I say, no matter how many times I need to, I say, excuse me, please, can I finish? or sorry, I'm not done yet. So these are a few small things, but I would generally say that I've been very fortunate in the environments I've worked in as well.
I love those practical words that you can use when you are being cut off or when you are being interrupted. They're great because they're still respectful, but they are also highlighting, no, I have something to say and I'm going to finish speaking before you have your turn.
Yeah. And all of these are uncomfortable, and the first few times feels uncomfortable, but then you get used to it. And more importantly, the people around you get used to it. So they stop interrupting.
Yeah. You've managed teams across 4 countries, driven major digital transformation initiatives. How did you ensure success between those teams in managing those fast paced projects? Because I would imagine those teams are quite well dispersed within different time zones.
Yes, I think, technology makes everything so much easier. And in that respect, COVID has been a boom. So really like using technology to connect and really being thoughtful about setting up meetings. That's more sort of the logistics part of it. But I think the magic lies, no matter whether you're working with dispersed teams or teams on the ground, is rallying the teams behind a shared vision or a goal, but then giving everyone very clear swim roles and responsibilities that's based on what the project needs, but also on their skills and interests and getting buy-in. So once you have the swim lanes and the roles and responsibilities set, then you can be basically very comfortable in the way things progress. In terms of reviews and looking at the project from a time to time basis, I've also been very intentional about it. There is a tendency to set up regular review meetings, and sometimes that can overwhelm the teams, especially as you mentioned, if they're in different time zones. So if the project needs it, we would do a 15-minute daily stand up for a period of like a month when things are really critical. But generally, I try to minimize these big kind of team-wide project reviews and really provide one-on-one coaching and guidance when needed based on where that particular individual in the team is. The other thing that I found really helpful was that even though everyone had their direct roles and responsibilities, I, as the manager, would have overall accountability. And that is so important for the team to know that there is someone that has your back, but also there is someone that can jump in and is enough across the details where if there are emergencies, and this was especially true during COVID, where there are emergencies pulling people away for caring for sick individuals, the manager can jump in and hit the ground running. And that was something that I was very intentional about as well.
What would your advice be for women on how to position themselves to be able to enter a tech environment when maybe they don't have that technical background to begin with?
Yeah, I mean, in a company like Google or a lot of tech companies, there are hundreds of non-technical roles. So, for example, Google has roles in partnerships, which is what I did, but also sales, marketing, strategy, finance, legal, sustainability, government relations, HR. So knowing that is important, knowing what kind of roles exist and then what you're interested in, right? So I would say that is the first step. The second step is once you have found out what interests you, not really focusing on the boxes that you don't check, because let's be real, no one checks 100% of all the qualifications that are listed in a job description. So instead of fixating on what you don't have, really find those skills and experiences in your career, in your life, where your skills and experiences are transferable to what is being asked for. And I'll give you a specific example later, but really finding that commonality and creating a compelling story around it. What value can I add and why? And then second, demonstrating a conviction and a willingness to learn the rest, because it's also not rocket science. So to give you a realistic example of my move from media to Google, I had spent eight and a half years in broadcast television. And when Google approached me for the news partnerships role, I realized that even though I didn't have technical knowledge of the news products, what I did know was all the pain points of the companies that Google would be partnering with, because I had worked in those companies. Having that empathy for the challenges that the news publishers are facing is what got me the job, and being able to really get a very compelling narrative out there. And then once I joined Google, I learned a lot about their technical products. It's about getting curious, and it's about learning how to learn. So what information is useful, what information isn't useful, and then really finding the people that could train you on that knowledge. So really, in summary, don't focus on what you don't have. Focus on what you can bring to the table. Build that bridge very clearly, because no one else is going to do it for you, and then show that you're great at learning.
Amazing. And I mean, we do know that women will think they have to tick all the boxes to be able to apply for the job. Men have, research shows that men know they don't have to check all the boxes and they'll apply for that job. So I think your advice there is just perfect for what our community needs to understand, is that if that role is of interest and there's alignment, find out how you can step into that. You don't have to tick every single box. Yeah. I'd love to understand, how have you balanced your successful career and your personal life? What might have been some of the standout choice moments for you that you're happy to share?
Yes, I think this is so relevant. And that's why I'm also very excited to see the course content that Even is planning, and that it's including life topics as well, not just career topics, because I think everything lives holistically. I talked about this a bit in one of your earlier questions, but let me repeat myself a little bit. I have a very macro outlook on life, and I have a very clear definition of what success means to me. And all my other decisions flow from that. And it's not always as simple, but I think having a very clear macro view just makes your decision making easier. My definition of success is balance between four pillars of my life, which is work, play, relationships, and health. And as long as these pillars are in harmony, I feel like I'm living a successful life. So, for instance, I'll give you some specific decisions that I've made. I made a decision very early on in my life to not have children. That's not related to my career alone. It just did not feel congruent with my definition of living a balanced life. I have checked in with myself at various points to see if that still sat with me as the right decision, but it always has. That's a non-traditional decision that I'm giving you an example of. Then there has been times where I have made a career-led decision. So for example, I was living in Hong Kong in 2014, 2015, and I was loving the city, working with Fox, fantastic media company. I then got an opportunity in Singapore to move within media, but to my first revenue role. It was terrifying. I did not want to move back to Singapore yet. I wasn't done with Hong Kong, but I knew that getting a revenue responsibility at that stage in my career would just supercharge my career. So I did move back to Singapore. In contrast, moving to Australia was a family first decision 3 years ago. It was the middle of the pandemic. Australia still had its borders closed, but my husband, who's an engineer, got a fantastic opportunity to move to Australia. Knowing that we wouldn't know when the borders between Australia and Singapore would open, I basically sent Google an ultimatum because they were dragging their feet. The business had approved my move, but I said, this is my flight ticket, June 1st. If you can't make it work, this is my resignation. And it was a tough decision, but I knew at that point I wanted to put my family first. So again, these are just examples to show that if you have your macro clear, all the rest will flow from it. And I also think, having kids is an irreversible decision, but most decisions in life are not irreversible. So if it turns out that it's not right for you, the maximum you lose is a couple of years, or maybe some money, but it's not going to permanently change your life.
Thank you for sharing those really concrete examples and being so open to share those as well. I think these are the types of conversations and insights we don't typically hear of from very successful people in business. And our view is that for women to be able to hear this from someone like yourself, it allows us to make our own personal decisions and be in control of our lives. Thank you for answering these questions with such honesty and such clarity. This is exactly what we're looking for in Even, is that we're talking to these awesome women who are doing awesome things, and we're learning from them, from their hard-earned expertise, because we know it can make a real difference for women to see role models that they can identify with.
What I love about Even is that It gives the women the access to upskill themselves, the support and the community without them having to uproot their day-to-day lives or having to get expensive degrees and put a pause on everything, right? From the concept, I view it as contemporary, as practical, and super relevant, both in terms of the content, but also format. And the other thing I'm a huge fan of is combining technology and people. I think if you can combine the human element and technology, you can just, do amazing things. And so that whole piece is really exciting for me. And it's created by women, the team passionate about this, educated and trained in this. I feel like that would be fantastic for women to take advantage of.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate everything you've shared.
Thank you, Ellen. Thank you so much for having me and for the great questions.
Thanks for listening today. I'm Ellen Sullivan, co-founder of Even. Find out more about Even at even-careers.com and tune in next week to hear from another amazing woman in business.